The following video is intended for mature audiences. It contains horror elements, adult themes, and language that might not be suitable for younger viewers. Few films have managed to encapsulate the spirit of both classic horror and comic book nostalgia as perfectly as George A. Romero and Stephen King's Creepshow. It was a haunting, eerie celebration of pulpy horror, and for those of us who loved that first anthology film, it set the bar high with its grim stories and darkly humorous tone. So, when Creepshow 2 arrived in 1987, it was only natural to expect something just as terrifyingly delightful. A follow-up that could continue the legacy of Romero and King's wicked genius. Sadly, Creepshow 2 doesn't quite live up to the towering expectations set by its predecessor. While it still maintains the anthology format and offers moments of twisted storytelling, it lacks the same sharpness and execution, leaving it feeling more like a shadow of the original. As a viewer who cherished Creepshow for its blend of gruesome imagery, dark humor, and biting commentary, I found the sequel to be a somewhat underwhelming experience. The spark was there, but the flame simply didn't burn as brightly this time. That said, Creepshow 2 is not without its merits. There are moments where it recaptures the spirit of the first film, but it often feels like it's struggling to balance its ambition with a noticeably lower budget and less refined storytelling. Despite its shortcomings, Creepshow 2 still has an eerie charm, delivering chills and a sense of nostalgia, especially for fans of 80s horror. However, as a whole, it falls short of the original's brilliance, leaving us wanting more of the unrelenting terror and witty moral lessons that made the first film such a standout in the horror genre. The anthology format of Creepshow allows for a unique approach to storytelling, one that relies heavily on short, sharp shocks of terror. Each segment, both in the original and in Creepshow 2, is a self-contained morality tale, much like the old EC comics that inspired the series. The structure works well for horror, playing on the audience's anticipation of seeing wrongdoers get their comeuppance in the most horrific and fitting ways possible. However, where the first Creepshow excelled in crafting nuanced stories that lingered in the psyche, Creepshow 2 feels more simplistic in its execution. The psychological tension that made the original film's segments so gripping is dialed back, and while there are still moments of fear, they are often overshadowed by an over-reliance on grotesque visuals rather than a creeping dread. This shift in focus leaves Creepshow 2 feeling more like a collection of horror set pieces rather than fully fleshed-out tales of terror. The film's psychological impact is diluted by its tendency to rush through key narrative beats, often leaving little time to build the suspense or develop the characters in a way that would make their fates truly resonate. In a genre where the audience is constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop, Creepshow 2 stumbles by failing to fully capitalize on the tension that made its predecessor so effective. Unlike the original Creepshow, which treated us to 5 macabre tales, Creepshow 2 is pared down to just 3 stories, bookended by an animated framing device that attempts to tie the segments together. While the decision to focus on fewer stories may have been intended to allow for deeper storytelling, it instead feels like a missed opportunity. The segments are uneven in both tone and execution, leaving the film feeling disjointed and, at times, rushed. Let's take a closer look at each of the segments. The first story, Old Chief Woodenhead, is perhaps the most disappointing of the 3. It centers around a wooden Native American statue that comes to life to exact revenge on those who wronged the elderly couple that tend to a small general store in a dying town. While the concept of a vengeful supernatural force is a staple of the horror genre, Old Chief Woodenhead suffers from pacing issues and lacks the psychological depth that would have made it more compelling. The villains in this segment are almost cartoonishly evil, which makes their eventual punishment feel less satisfying. There is little tension or complexity here, just a straightforward revenge tale that lacks the chilling, eerie build-up that could have made it more memorable. The segment also falls short in its depiction of Native American mythology. While the idea of using Native American lore in horror is intriguing, the execution here feels surface level, relying on tropes and stereotypes rather than exploring the deeper, more unsettling aspects of cultural revenge. The wooden statue is a powerful symbol, but the film fails to fully explore its potential, leaving it feeling like a missed opportunity for psychological horror. The second story, The Raft, fares better and is often considered the highlight of Creepshow 2. It follows a group of teenagers who find themselves trapped on a raft in the middle of a lake, stalked by a malevolent blob-like creature lurking in the water. The Raft plays on primal fears of being trapped and helpless, and it is in this segment that Creepshow 2 comes closest to recapturing the terror of the original film. The creature itself is an amorphous, mindless force of nature, representing the ultimate inescapable death, a theme that resonates strongly in horror. The sense of isolation, combined with the character's growing realization that there is no escape, creates a tension that is genuinely unsettling. However, even this story falls prey to Creepshow 2's tendency to rush through its narrative beats. The characters are little more than archetypes, teens destined for a grisly end, and while their fates are appropriately gruesome, the lack of character development means that the psychological impact of their demise is diminished. The horror of The Raft is immediate and visceral, but it doesn't linger in the mind the way the original film segments did. The final segment, The Hitchhiker, is a fittingly dark tale of guilt and karmic retribution. It follows a woman who, after hitting a hitchhiker with her car and leaving him for dead, is haunted by his increasingly decayed corpse as he relentlessly pursues her. The Hitchhiker works as a classic ghost story, and its simple premise allows for some genuinely chilling moments. The sense of inevitability, of being unable to escape one's guilt, gives the story a psychological edge that sets it apart from the other segments. As the hitchhiker's mangled body continues to pursue the woman, the tension builds to a fever pitch, and the film taps into the primal fear of being hunted by something that cannot be stopped. Despite its strengths, The Hitchhiker is hampered by Creepshow 2's uneven tone. The horror is at times undercut by moments of dark humor, and while the segment delivers some effective scares, it never fully commits to the psychological horror that could have made it truly terrifying. The story is chilling, but it ultimately feels like a rehash of a familiar trope rather than something groundbreaking. One of the things that made Creepshow such a beloved film for horror fans was its ability to balance horror, humor, and social commentary in a way that felt fresh and exciting. The stories were darkly funny, but they also had a bite to them, a sense of moral justice that was as satisfying as it was terrifying. The villains were punished in creative and horrifying ways, and it brought the viewer joy to watch these characters meet their fates. Creepshow 2, however, lacks that same sharpness. The moral lessons in these stories feel more heavy-handed, and the dark humor that permeated the first film is largely absent. Instead, Creepshow 2 leans more heavily on gore and shock value, which, while effective in small doses, doesn't have the same lasting impact as the original's more nuanced approach. The framing device, which in the first film was a charming homage to the horror comics of the 50s, is also weaker in the sequel. The animated sequences feel cheap and lack the same eerie charm, and the Creepshow mascot, the Creep, isn't as memorable or unsettling as the original Crypt Keeper-like figure from the first film. It's a small detail, but it contributes to the overall sense that Creepshow 2 is a lesser version of its predecessor. While Creepshow 2 certainly falls short of the original's brilliance, it's not a complete misfire. For fans of 80s horror, there is still plenty to enjoy here, particularly in the gruesome special effects and the pulpy, comic book feel that permeates the film. There are moments of genuine tension, particularly in The Raft and The Hitchhiker, and the film retains enough of the original's spirit to make it a worthwhile watch for die-hard fans of the genre. But for those of us who were captivated by the twisted genius of Creepshow, this sequel can't help but feel like a disappointment. It's a film that promises much but ultimately delivers little, offering fleeting moments of terror, but failing to leave the lasting psychological scars that make the best horror so unforgettable. As someone who loved the first Creepshow, I found Creepshow 2 to be a pale imitation, a film that strives to recapture the magic but falls short in almost every way. In the end, Creepshow 2 is a film that is overshadowed by the towering legacy of its predecessor. It's a decent horror anthology in its own right, but it lacks the psychological depth, wit, and biting commentary that made the original such a standout. For fans of Stephen King and George A. Romero, it's worth watching as a curiosity, but it's unlikely to leave the same lasting impression. Ultimately, Creepshow 2 is a missed opportunity, a film that could have built on the strengths of the original but instead feels like a lesser version of what came before. While it may offer some nostalgic thrills for fans of 80s horror, it's unlikely to win over new audiences or reach the same heights as the first Creepshow. As much as I wanted to love this film, I can't help but feel that it fell short of my expectations, leaving me longing for the macabre brilliance of the original. Creepshow 2 is a fantasy horror that is 1 hour and 32 minutes long and is rated R. The Southern Underworld gives it 3 bloody knives. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you next time. Thank you for watching.